It's no surprise that building a business also means building a team. And we hear it all the time where people have built a job and not a business. So the question is how do you start to build a team, put the pieces together? How do you manage people? How do you make sure that they are doing a great job? How do you make sure that you're constantly being a good leader for them? Those are the questions that you should be asking if you're thinking about building a team. Now, look, you don't need to be having $1 million business before you start building a team. You can have something as simple as starting with a virtual assistant or a part-time virtual assistant or contractors or whatever it may look like. Well, last week from when I'm recording this episode, Rachel, our COO, gave a presentation to all of the NGM students about team building and how we manage the team here inside of Team Lucero. Everything from how do we keep them inspired to how do we structure our meetings to how do we build out system and process, how do we hire, and even mindset issues that may come along with that. The presentation was so good, we decided to turn it into a podcast episode, and that's what you're going to listen to today. So if you're excited, well, keep on listening. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. We have coming up next is Rachel, who needs no introduction. You guys already know her from the sales objection training, coming in to talk about how to build a team. And so for those of you who maybe missed the first part of today, it's kind of an interesting story about how Rachel came into be in the role that she's in. Started off as an NGM student, just like you, then upgraded to what is now NGM Plus, but was mentorship back then became a coach, then became head coach, then became COO. So I guess what I'm saying is one day you guys could be COO of this company if you follow Rachel's path. But no, it's been a blessing to have Rachel come into the company, and she began filling roles that I didn't even know we needed to be filled, and has done an amazing job. And took a lot of convincing to get her to give up her own business, which was a multiple six-figure business, and come in and take into this role, and has just done an above and beyond what I thought was possible. And so it's a really big privilege for me to have her on stage here with you guys, teaching you what she's been doing here and team building and basically running the company. So with that being said, Rachel, I'm gonna hand it to you and just let you do your thing.
Thank you. Also, I wasn't expecting you to make me cry. It's only 11 a.m. It's too early for tissues.
It's never too early for a good cry.
Yes, you always say that. Guys, how's the event going so far? I'm loving it. I hope you're loving it. I'm very excited to be joining you again. And thank you, Brandon, for that lovely introduction. Maria, thank you. Yay. I'm so glad you're loving the event, and it's helpful for you guys so far. Also, some of you here just joined NGM Plus. Welcome. And I'm excited to get to know you guys better, dig into your businesses with you. And as you may have guessed from my previous presentation on day one, sales is my jam. I do love helping students with their sales process. But one of the reasons I do love that is because once we fix kind of basic messaging and sales skills, we get to dive into bigger problems like building a profitable business and a business that is poised to scale. And that is my real passion, because ultimately, all of you want more impact. You want to help more people. You want to grow a business. And in order to do that, you need to structure your business in such a way that it can scale and that it can scale profitably. Because the point is not just to say that you're a multiple six-figure entrepreneur or a seven-figure or an eight-figure, whatever it is, right? You want to do that profitably. Otherwise, you'll have to close the doors, right? And that's not the idea. So in order for you to get there, you have to have help. You can't do it alone. You're not an island. And even if it's not, you don't have to have a full-time team the way we do, but you need someone, you need some people to help you, even if it's part-time. So today and now in this presentation, we're going to look at that aspect of getting help. Even if it's only you in the business right now, this is very relevant for you, okay? So you guys already know kind of what we do inside of our mentorship. I know you guys know because Brandon talked about this a little bit, but how we're going to parse out this conversation, they're going to be like two parts. So I would say the first part will be about a pathway. What could be a pathway to success for you guys as it pertains to your next hire? It might be your first hire or it might be your next hire. Either way, we're going to lay out a pathway for you guys to follow, kind of criteria to follow in order to hire into the correct role, whatever that next hire is. The second part is going to be about how to get the best out of that hire, right? Because it's not just about filling a role, it's about filling a role and then making that role very successful. And that's really what building a profitable team is all about. So I want you to look at this as an intro because this topic of profitable hiring and team building is something we could dive into for months together. So look at this as an intro. Okay, sound good to you guys? I am going to share my screen. Yes, Judy, honestly, I was thinking about you today or the other day and even this morning as I was kind of going through my slides. I was thinking, this is for Judy. I swear to God, I was thinking about you. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. All right. So hiring. I want you to give me a number in the chat. The lowest number is going to be 1, okay? 1 is if you are the only person in your business. So if you have literally no one else helping you, you're a 1. And give me a higher number if you have anyone helping you, a VA, a part-time VA, a video editor, anything, okay? So let's just kind of gauge where people are at. Yeah, a tech guy, exactly. Anyone who helps you in any capacity is more than a 1. Okay, and we're just going to kind of gauge where people are at. And on the screen right now, you guys are going to see some possible first hires, let's say. These aren't, obviously, this is not an expansive list by no means, but these are just kind of some popular choices, let's say. So I'm looking at kind of the chat and I'm seeing everybody is, let's see, what is the highest one that I see here? But everybody is somewhere between, I think 3 was the highest. Katie, 3, Courtney Boutte, yeah. Judy, 3, Jeannie, 3. Okay, yeah. So between 1 and 3, perfect. So you're in the right spot, okay? Okay, so let's talk about why we should hire. What is it going to solve, right? So first of all, first and foremost, it's always time management, right? There's too much to do, too little time, right? Maybe your to-do list gets longer instead of shorter. Have you ever had that happen? Maybe you dread your workday because between life and work, there's just not enough time, right? Maybe you're answering emails while you're supposed to be watching your kids in the park. That was me. Just full disclaimer. That was me. It's not a good feeling. So it makes you think I have to hire. I have to get some help. Somebody has to help me. Another reason, another thing hiring can solve is, or attempt to solve, is people management problems. So perhaps some of you, those of you who are 2 and 3 in the chat, you've hired out a VA, let's say, and you've laid out the expectations, but now you're having to micromanage that person all day, every day. And not only is it not saving you time, it's probably costing you time. Yes, Judy, I got you, girl. And maybe you're having the same conversations over and over, and that person is still making the same mistakes. They're just like not getting it, right? So sometimes we want to hire in order to stop the people management problems because nobody likes it. Another reason or another thing hiring can solve is productivity, right? So maybe you actually are spending a decent amount of time in your business, but it ends up being unproductive. It's not well used. You think to yourself, I should probably get 10 things knocked off my to-do list today, but in reality, I only got 3 done. And there's this like endless cycle of self-disappointment. Or maybe you do have a small team, those of you who are 2 and 3s, maybe you have a little small team and you're asking yourself, am I actually wasting time on having meetings with people? Maybe we could be more effective. Are we actually getting anything done? I can share with you in our team, we have meetings all the time. We have a regular meeting cadence. One of the things we do is a meeting audit. Like periodically, I will ask the team, do you guys feel like we're being effective? Are we being productive? Can we take a meeting off? Can some things be resolved over Slack or email? Like, does everything have to be a meeting, right? So constantly calibrating, fine-tuning productivity. And then growth. So whether we look at personal growth or business growth, hiring will force you to grow, and it will solve the problem of you not growing. And here's what I mean by that. So team building is going to push you in the direction of growth, whether it's your business growth, like your revenue is just plateaued, it's stuck somewhere, maybe God forbid it's declining, but even if it's not declining, it's just stuck and you can't break through a certain ceiling barrier. Growing a team will force you to break through that barrier if you do it right, of course. And if you find yourself, like, who was saying this in the chat just now? Kate, I've hired and fired more VAs than I'd like. If you find yourself more and more frustrated with people not doing their job and then you having to fill in those gaps, and you don't know why you have to do this over and over more than you'd like, Kate, right? This is a sign to me there's some growth there that we have to get through. Okay, so tell me, yes, Russell, I absolutely agree with what you just said in the chat. Tell me, out of these kind of 4 big picture buckets, which one of these have you experienced? I mean, I can tell you in my own business, I experienced all of them. And even inside Brandon's business, probably all of them too. But I'm curious on your end. Yeah. What have you experienced? Yes, the people management. Productivity. Love it. Cool. So what should we hire for then? Let's say let's say you're already convinced, okay, I know I need to hire. How do I go about it? I'm sure you could all think of like 10 roles that you would like to offload to someone else. Which one is first? I'm going to share with you what the criteria most people would, email management, what most people would do. Okay. Most of the time, what we look at is what is a repetitive task. For example, posting on social media, busy work, podcast backend stuff for sure. What is low value, right? What are tasks that I could pay someone $5 or $10 an hour to do for me? What are tasks I don't like? Who doesn't want to offload the tasks they don't like, right? I couldn't stand posting on social media. That was always the first thing I wanted to get rid of. A lot of people don't like managing their own ads because I don't blame you. It's a jungle out there on Facebook, on Meta, and it changes every day. Like it's impossible to keep up with. Some people don't enjoy sales calls and they're dying to offload that. Sometimes we want to hire for performance, right? We're looking for a certain level of expertise or knowledge. A player is what we would call, right? So for example, that would be a sales closer for sure would go into that category, an integrator, someone who's in fulfillment for you. Let's say someone who takes on the role of coaching or student success. And I love what you guys all wrote in here. But when we base our hiring criteria off of one of those that we just looked at, it can end up costing you more time. And I'll tell you why. And this is one of the reasons why y'all are in this cycle of hiring and firing and hiring and firing. So let's take an example from sales, okay? Sales call closer. And the reason this is top of my mind is because I recently worked on this with a student. Lots of entrepreneurs hire out a sales team, a closer, because they hate doing sales. They hate doing sales calls. Maybe they're not great at it. Maybe they just want somebody else to handle objections. Maybe they want to avoid the rejection, because the reality is, like, literally 80% of the people are going to say no to your offer. And sometimes it's hard to hear that rejection over and over and over, right? So I can absolutely understand wanting to hand this off to someone. But here's the thing. Nobody can sell your offer better than you can, and no one can do it before you yourself have mastered how to do it. And I want to remind you, I know you heard this from Brandon and from me. Brandon and I spent almost an entire year being the sales team. Before we hired out, Brandon and I the company was already at multiple seven figures. We sat there on sales calls, and we were the closers. We set for ourselves and we closed ourselves for almost an entire year. Was it hard? Yes, it was really hard. But yes, Emily is awesome. But we could not even think about bringing on an Emily before we ourselves mastered who was coming to these calls, what were their problems, how do you get around those problems, how do you objection handle, how do you structure the call. There was none of that was going to happen until we mastered our own sales process first. And I'll give you a spoiler alert. Even if you have the knowing of how to sell your offer, I have students in my pod, literally yesterday or the day before I saw this, who are closing at an insanely high rate. I have students in my pod who are right now closing 80% of sales call. It's unheard of. So let's say you've gotten really good like that at your own sales calls and you hired out. Guess what? Now we only do sales calls for NGM plus Katie. Guess what? Now you're the sales team leader. You're not out of sales calls at all. You're not out of sales. You're just not the closer, but you are a sales team leader. And to this day, I'm the sales team leader. Brandon and I go to sales team meetings every single day, 5 days a week. So, I'm reviewing calls. I review setter calls. I review closer calls. I give feedback. I manage the team. So unless you're aware of this, it can very easily lead to frustration, right? And thoughts like, well, I'm paying someone to figure this out, so why don't they figure it out? Which leads to more time suck and more overwhelm, which is exactly the thing we're trying to solve for. Yes, Francis, we're about to get to that. You are reading my mind. Okay, so what should you hire? So if the criteria we talked about earlier is not the right criteria, what is the right criteria? And should we hire only A players, or should we hire VAs, or should we not hire? Like, what should we do here? Here are the top 4 criteria for hiring. Time, 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 and time. The number one finite resource you have and what you need to solve for until you're at 7, multi-7 even, figures of revenue is time. In order to scale, you have to learn how to leverage your time. And so that's going to mean different things for different business owners. Some of you are on sales calls all day. Do you guys remember Brandon brought Coach Beverly's messaging as an example the other day in his presentation about messaging that is working right now? She's one of our senior coaches, and she's been a coach in the program, I want to say, for 5 years. She had probably 15 or 20 sales calls on her calendar every single week for months. Months. And she took all of them. She mastered her own sales for a long time before she started hiring out a setter and closer team. So for her, the obvious hire at that stage was a setter and close. She did a setter, whatever, but sales. It was sales because she was spending 20 hours a week on sales calls, which is a lot. But she had to do it for some time in order to gain mastery. And then she could train someone else to do it for her. Some of you, maybe this is you, Judy, are in your inbox or in your DMs all day. And it's taking you away from roles that only you can fill as a CEO. Others are in fulfillment all day. So I don't know where each one of you is at, but if you zoomed out for a minute and looked at where you spend the most time in non-CEO roles, hire for that next. What's a non-CEO role? Posting on social media is not a CEO role. Customer service. Where's my login? I can't find the thing. Can I change my credit card? That's not a CEO role. Messaging, that's a CEO role. Brandon, by the way, this is what he spends a lot of his time inside of our company, writing messaging. It's not just $10 tasks, but yes, $10 tasks for sure are not CEO roles. But if you're doing $10 tasks, Francis, but you're not really spending a lot of time on it, I wouldn't hire for that. Not immediately. I would first hire for the thing that sucks up your time. So the reality is your social media manager, for example, or your social media VA might not directly affect your sales, right? They may or they may not. If you have great messaging, obviously your social media will absolutely bring in sales. Those of you who have watched Judy's, and I know not just Judy, I'm just picking on Judy because she's in my head. But those of you who have seen Judy's testimonial, she grew 600,000 followers and her business grew from $2,000 or $3,000 per week to $10,000 per week on a bad week. That's 40K a month. So obviously, this is all organic, by the way. She doesn't do ads. Obviously, social media can bring you and will. How did she do that? Because she mastered her messaging. That's how she did that. So if you have great messaging, your social media will absolutely bring in sales. But I know there's a lot of advice out there about hiring revenue generating positions. And it's not that that's bad advice. It's not that it's wrong. But to me, hiring a revenue generating position is more about structuring the correct KPIs within that role. It's not about whether you should hire for that role or not. So what I'm trying to say here is that the ROI on a hire is sometimes indirect. Now, I know some of you are thinking, oh yeah, I would love to hire, but I can't afford it. So I'm going to give you a few guidelines on how to hire, even if you think you can't afford it. And for starters, I'll say this is a limiting belief that you're better than other people at whatever it is you might be hiring for. It's also a limiting belief that you can't afford it. I would argue you can't afford not to hire in the long run. But that aside, and this goes back to, I think Francis made this point earlier, prioritize process over talent and experience in the beginning. Okay, so those of you who wrote a 1 in the chat, you're at the beginning of hiring, right? Because you haven't hired yet. I want you to prioritize the process so that you can hire someone who is less talented than you, perhaps less experienced than you, and they can still execute with success. Okay, so that's the first part of it. The second part, sales is the bloodline of your business. It is the highest value activity. So hire for that last. Even if you're spending your time there right now, it is probably well spent time because you are gaining mastery of your sales process is very important for your business, and you have to make sales. So while I said hire for whatever sucks up the most amount of time, if that thing is sales, don't offload that prematurely, okay? There's a right time to do that. Hire people who are going to own their roles. This includes VAs, and this means a lot of things, owning your role, right? This is a segue into profitable team building. Okay, this is the second part of once you hire, okay, let's say you've hired, you've done a time audit, you've figured out where you need to hire. Now you've hired, how are you going to get the most out of this person? How are you going to build this team to be profitable? Now, team is about leadership. And while we're not going to get into all aspects of leadership right now, I am going to give you some things, some pointers to consider, guidelines as you evaluate your own leadership skills. Before I do that, I'm just going to check the chat to see what we got. Anne, when you say hire, does that include contractor hires for specific tasks? I would say if it's like, if you're hiring a video editor, one-time thing, or even if it's a recurring thing just to edit your videos, yeah, I would include that because that person requires good leadership, and that person requires a process they can follow in order to be successful. I don't mean a process they can follow in terms of you telling them how to do their job, because some things you simply will not know how to do. I couldn't edit a video, not in a way that looks really good. So I can't tell somebody how to edit, but I can tell somebody what I want it to look like. So I can have that process laid out very clearly for them to follow so that using their skills and expertise, they can be successful. Hopefully that answers your question. Would a social media manager just do posting? Yes. So messaging is not something a social media manager will do for you. We have a social media manager. She rocks. Her name is Jessie. You might probably seen her here in the chat. Excuse me. She does not write the messaging. Brandon writes the messaging. She puts things together. She has a strategy for posting. She has a strategy for growing our reach or our followers. She tries out new things. So she does obviously all the scheduling. She pulls together from different places. So she manages all of it, and she's responsible for posting, but she doesn't write the posts. So hopefully I clarified that. There she is, the amazing Jessie. The terror of trusting someone to take care of your baby and do it in a way that is the same or better than you. Okay, I'm gonna, Judy, may I give you a little bit of tough love for a moment? And I do it with love and respect because genuinely I adore you. Your business is not your baby. It is not your baby. It is a machine. It brings in people, it gives them a transformation, and then it outputs a transformed person, and you get money out of it and you grow your impact. But if you look at your baby, if you look at your business like your baby, there's an attachment there. And that is a place for you to grow as a person, as a CEO and a business owner, in order for you to scale. This is the thing that prevents you from scaling. I knew Judy could handle it, so yes. And even babies grow up. Don't say that, Ben. But it's true, yes. Okay, so let's take a look at leadership. All right. People will own their roles to the degree, at the degree to which you provide leadership for them. Now, this is true in every role. This is true for A players and B players and ABCD players. And this is why it's so powerful, because you can get stellar results from someone even if you're paying them $5 an hour. As long as you understand what kind of leadership to provide them with, you will get you will generate profit from that hire. So let's dig into this a little bit. What is good leadership? There's a lot of components. I'm just going to give you my top favorite. Number one, transparency. So when you're in charge of something, if you're in charge of, let's say, a VA, right? You're the manager. Obviously, all of you people here sitting, you're the CEO. You are in charge of the whole business. You're automatically the authority. And people will look up to you. It's natural, right? So don't let it go to your head. But at the same time, don't underestimate the fact that you do hold authority with people. And transparency doesn't mean sharing or oversharing. It doesn't mean sharing everything. It doesn't mean being vulnerable about every single thing that has happened and is happening. It means sharing the right things. A couple weeks ago, we had a meeting. We have these team meetings on a regular basis. And one of our meetings was on a Friday. And in the beginning, we share what we're grateful for. So we go around, kind of round robin in the room. Everybody shares something they're grateful for. And when it was my turn, my grateful was for our sales mentor. I know you guys you've heard me and Brandon talk about the fact that we've hired, when we were building out our sales team, we hired mentors to help us with the process of building a team and building and creating the process for that, etc. And that week, I had asked our sales mentor for feedback on two separate items. One of them was a sales team meeting that I had submitted. I submitted the recording of a sales team meeting for review. And the intention of that is to get feedback on leadership. And he came back with some tough love for me. The entire team was like, what did he say? And so I shared it with them. And it was really good feedback for me as a leader to consider how I can improve myself. The other item I had asked for feedback for was this recurring issue that I was having with a team member. And I shared how I addressed the issue. And his coaching to me was that I wasn't going deep enough in these conversations with this team member because I wanted to avoid the conflict. And I was keeping it surface level, therefore I wasn't actually solving it. So his coaching was to address the deeper issues that I knew were at play. And so I shared this with our team, and what they said back was how much they appreciated the transparency, that it was good to see me, someone they look up to, someone who has a certain level of authority in the business, lead by example. That even with experience and knowledge and education and whatever it is that one might bring to the table, I have a lot to grow still. I need mentoring, I need coaching. And it almost like gives permission to the rest of the team to get coached. It gives them the reassurance that there's nothing wrong with them when they don't have it all put together, when they don't have all the answers, when they don't do a perfect job in their role, right? And so I'm sure you guys know this from your own students that you help, right? Everybody needs coaching and mentoring no matter what level you're at, right? You can't see your blind spots. It's natural. And since growth is a company value for us, this was one way I was holding myself to that value. And I noticed that in the days following that meeting, there was an immediate increased ownership in almost all the departments. The next thing in good leadership, radical accountability. This is another one of our core values as a company and as a team. You need to be in integrity with your word as a leader. So before you look to point fingers at a VA or a team member or to blame anything, circumstances, or a person, double and triple check yourselves. That's what we do on our team. We double and triple check ourselves that there isn't anything we can do that is fully in our control to affect the outcome. And we take full ownership of our part in whatever the situation is. And this goes for you as a CEO as well. So before you point fingers at the VA who's not doing their job, have you provided the best environment? Have you provided the right support? Have you provided the structure? Have you provided the process? And can you take accountability for your part in the results? The degree to which people can make mistakes and learn from them without it costing their job is how we measure good leadership. No negative consequences. And I'll explain what I mean by that, right? As long as everyone is acting in good faith, right? Obviously, if someone is stealing from the company, there's going to be a negative consequence. If someone is consistently underperforming and you've done everything and they've done everything and it's just not working, there's going to be a negative consequence. But barring those cases, most of the time, people they just need to get better. They just need to develop better skills. And they make mistakes. And mistakes are required for growth and getting the knowing, right? Just like you guys test your messaging, sometimes it flops. But you need to have a safe experience, a safe space to keep practicing. And so does every person on your team. So this extends to speaking up during meetings, right? The things that you're thinking in your mind when you hear someone talking, having a safe space where you can actually say those things, having uncomfortable conversations, boundaries. This is something that has to be done, obviously, with respect. And I would say on our team, we cultivate a vibe and a culture where we can disagree. Sometimes we disagree strongly, and sometimes we get frustrated, right? We're human. But we work through it because we know everybody has the best intentions in mind. Everybody wants the success of this business, and we hold deep respect for one another. And the last thing I want to highlight on leadership is KPIs. We need to be measuring, KPI stands for Key Performance Index. We need to be measuring revenue generating items in any given role. Okay, so this will require you to know which numbers to track for growth. It's not just random numbers. I don't like tracking numbers for the sake of saying that I'm tracking numbers, because if I'm not actually going to be taking action on those numbers, why am I tracking them? So I always ask myself, okay, why am I looking for this information? What am I going to do with it before I actually go get it? But once I know the right numbers to track, those are numbers that will move the dial, both in terms of profit and revenue. That is what I start tracking in every single department. And the very first thing I did when I stepped into this role of COO in this company was I spent time in each department figuring out what are the KPIs for that department. And they change, by the way, sometimes they change, right? Like for example, in our organic department, organic strategy, we've changed KPIs, and that's okay because we have a better, deeper understanding of what growth means in every given department. I'll give you an example from our fulfillment. You guys know, I'll talk about that in a sec. You guys know Julie, right? She's the head of our student success department. She's amazing. And when I stepped into the COO role, we weren't tracking our renewal rate on a regular basis. Like we knew it, kind of big picture, but it wasn't something we tracked and drilled deep into on a regular basis. That was the first thing we did, is we put in KPIs to track renewals. Yes, she is phenomenal, for real. We increased our renewal rate, and we carved out a pathway to a 7-figure revenue stream based off of renewals only. This isn't something we put an ad on. There's no social media attached to it. We don't talk about it at the front of our funnel. We don't even really talk about it inside of the program, but it is its own 7-figure revenue stream. It gives us feedback on what to improve inside of our programs. And Julie is crushing it in her role because she takes full ownership of it. And my job with her is to give her the space to come up with ideas. Sometimes they fly and sometimes they don't. And that's okay. Sometimes she gets frustrated with me. Sometimes she doesn't like how I challenge her. But guess what? She accepts the challenge and she regains more personal power. Julie, it's okay. Which is another core value of our team. AJ, what KPIs does the social media manager have? So for us, so this will be different for different businesses. I'm just going to share what's right for us. It doesn't mean it's right for everyone. We measure number of posts that we do. So our Instagram, for example, is our social media platform primarily. But really, where our growth is actually not on Instagram, it's on our podcast. So on the podcast, we measure downloads. And we have a KPI of growing downloads month by month. On Instagram, we measure number of posts. So we have a certain number of posts that we have to hit. Because our follower growth on Instagram is less of an indicator of our growth than our downloads on the podcast. Hopefully that made sense for you. Yeah? Did that answer, AJ? Okay, good. Cool. Okay, so we talked about two related but separate things. One was, what should be our criteria of hiring, right? How should we think about it? We talked about solving for time. We talked about prioritizing process over experience at first. When you get to a certain level of revenue, you can start prioritizing experience, performance. But in the beginning, I want you to prioritize process. We talked about being in sales first, okay? Don't hire that out yet. And we talked about owning a role. So when you do hire, you want the person to own a role. And how you do that is through your leadership, in which we talked about transparency, radical accountability, allowing people to make mistakes, and tracking the KPIs. When you combine the right hiring criteria with the right leadership, that means you have the right people in the right positions, and you know how to nurture their growth. That is the thing that lets you scale. It allows you to multiply profit. And of course, there is more to profit than just team, right? I don't want you to think this is the only source of profit. There's more to it than that. But when it comes to team, they will make or break your profit. And so for us, we look at the standalone profitability of every single department. I personally like it when departments are structured to be profitable, independent of anything external. And this isn't to say that we aren't interdependent. We are very much interdependent. We have departments like organic, like marketing, which have a lot of crossover into other departments. But we also have a path to profit independently of other departments. And you don't have to structure your business in this way. I'm just sharing with you my preference and how we're doing it. But I want you to understand that profitability is in large part, a function of hiring for the right roles.
Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.